Quiet! So, you want to learn the way of the fist, huh? Well, there is no better place for fitness, discipline, self-defense, confidence, and fun. Learning to fight is a very important part of anyone's physical, mental, and spiritual development. It doesn't matter if you're a loser, a little wimp, or a nerd, there is nothing better than some good old-fashioned, ass-kicking, all-American karate to leave your asthma, peanut allergies, and all of that other made-up crap behind. Get off the spectrum and become a badass. But it's not all cool kicks, cooler snakes, and hot babes. Or kata and bonsai trees if you want to be lame about it. With great power comes great responsibility, and while it can make you feel mighty, the weight of the fist is fraught with danger. And when you step into that arena, armed with nothing but your hands, it can easily escalate into a matter of life and death. Especially when your opponent can kill you with a single touch. So, before I tell you the story of one of the biggest villains in karate history, I must warn you that once you go down this path, there is no going back. So are you ready?
Yes, Sensei.
I said, are you ready?
Yes, Sensei!
It's karate time. Count Dante and the Dojo Wars. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get started, the prophecy has come true. As it was written, they are back. It's the return of your boy, Raid Shadow Legends. That's right, your boy is back and better than ever with one of the biggest events yet, the Asgard Divide. And you know what? It is so cool that I'm going to let it speak for itself, so strap in boys and let's see what Raid has been cooking. That's so cool. Awooga.
Please, let's not resort to violence. Very well. So violence it is.
Sick moves.
Aren't you fed up with cleaning up the gods' mess? Existing only to fight their
So fast.
Send them my regards.
Loki, this is my...
Oh no man, she's dead.
Let us usher Temeria into a new era.
Sick transition. But of course, a raid event is only as good as its champions, and the Asgard Divide is a doozy because while the event is running until the 22nd of November, you can collect 4 champions inspired by Norse mythology, who exist in the world of Teleria as members of the mysterious and powerful Fae. You've got Odin Faefather, who can steal enemy buffs and revive allies, Freya Fateweaver, who can buff her allies' defense and protect them with shields, Thor Faehammer, who dishes out a lot of area of effect damage with his Thunder counter ability, and if you log into Raid for 7 days between now and the 23rd of October, you can get the free legendary champion Loki the Deceiver, who can evade enemy attacks by cloaking himself under the Perfect Veil buff. And if you log in for an additional 7 days after that, you can get even more rewards. And on top of that, there is also a second phase of rewards up for grabs after earning the 14 days of login bonuses. The other champions are unlockable via in-game activities, so make sure you get into Raid during the event and find them. A good place to start might be the Event Dungeon, a time-limited dungeon where you'll face off against enemies and a boss. In this case, the big showdown will be against Big Odin Faefather himself. But if you want even more goodies, then click my link in the description box down below or scan the QR code on the screen to get some bonuses available only via the link, including a huge starter pack with an epic champion from the Orcs faction, Ultimate Gallic, and once you reach level 15, you will get another starter pack that includes an epic Zargala, also of the Orcs. And once you're up and running, come and join my clan, the Dank Brigade. John Timothy Keehan was born on the 2nd of February 1939 in Chicago. Not struggling to survive and fighting for his life in the mean streets, but in an affluent household with Irish-American parents, his father being a doctor. While Keehan didn't boast any kind of tragic backstory, he still got into fighting pretty early on, having wrestled in school before getting into boxing. Keehan claimed that the latter came about after one of the only fights that he ever lost in his life, where he confronted an intruder in his own house during the night, and he got the shit beaten out of him. Afterwards, his father got him into boxing to toughen him up. Allegedly, because a lot of this information is from Keehan himself, and as far as Mad Lads go, we probably have our most unreliable narrator yet. He really liked to spin a yarn. So Keehan spent his teenage years training at Johnny Cooloon's 63rd Street gym, which was well known for its diversity. A bit of a hot button topic at the time and a rather prominent theme in this story. From school, Keehan went straight into the military, first joining the Marine Reserves, where he learned jiu-jitsu and other hand-to-hand combat. And then he moved to the army, where he spent his time skirmishing as a guerrilla in the mountains during the Cuban Revolution. Yeah, Keehan was definitely, totally a mountain gorilla. Trust me, bro, he told everyone all about it. But what we do know actually happened was that Keehan got his first exposure to more traditional martial arts. You see, in the 1950s, karate was starting to come to the US from Asia, as GIs who were stationed there during the war brought back what they had learned. And it soon began to catch on because much mystique, very esoteric, just don't ask how they got the swords. Keehan got so into karate that he decided to pursue it full time. But first, he had to dispense with his soldiering obligations. So he hatched a plan to get kicked out of the army by stealing cars, going AWOL, and making false police reports. Eventually, in 1960, Keehan got his discharge, and he went back to Chicago to paint fences and sand floors. Helping Keehan on this training arc was a GI karate pioneer named Robert Trius, who is considered the father of American karate. Showing a lot of potential, Keehan quickly earned his black belt and gained enough experience and prestige to help Trius found and expand the fledgling United States Karate Association. And Keehan would prove to be a major asset in putting it on the map in the Midwest, because he had a very uncanny gift for publicity. Maybe a little too uncanny. On the 28th of July 1963, the first World Karate Tournament was held at the Chicago Coliseum, and Keehan drew in crowds with his first little white lie, telling everyone that it was full contact. But it paid off, and the tournament was a big success, leading to Keehan helping to make it ever bigger and better the following year. Reportedly, one of the subsequent tournaments was attended by Bruce Lee before he became famous. However, if he did actually show up, Keehan wouldn't have even been there to actually meet him. And also, he probably wasn't there. While Keehan's larger-than-life promotional style was great for getting arses in seats, his bending of the truth wasn't exactly lending the USKA any credibility, to the point where, despite all he had done for them, he became a liability. On the 7th of December 1964, just after his promotion to 3rd Dan, Keehan was kicked out of the USKA for conduct unbecoming of the true spirit of a karate-do. However, Keehan was adamant that this unbecoming behaviour was actually trying to promote non-Asian minorities to black belt, and objecting to the USKA's use of whites-only facilities. While many of Keehan's claims are rather difficult to verify, this one is easily discarded because Trius was very quick to point out that 40% of the USKA's membership was black. And those students almost unanimously stayed with him after Keehan's departure. But while Keehan's promotion of black students may or may not have been a problem for Trius, the way he was teaching those students certainly was. As a young attendee of the 1964 World Karate Championship named Floyd Webb described, "We're watching things like people's teeth getting knocked out. For a no-contact tournament, there was a lot of contact." Yeah, Keehan was more than a little bit full on in how he taught his students, on which Webb quoted him as saying, "You didn't know what you knew until you actually went out and fought somebody." And you can see why this would have been a little bit of a problem for Trius. Especially since this wasn't just some dirty little secret, a backroom where guys who want to go nuts can have at it without the public clutching their pearls. No, Keehan was very, very open about how much he prioritised aggression and brutality in his training. He didn't even try to tone it down when a CBS News reporter came to visit and asked Keehan if someone could be seriously injured while doing karate.
Well, how seriously can you injure someone just with your hands or your feet?
Well, you can very easily kill someone if you know how to hit them and where to hit them. This is the whole thing. The trained over the untrained.
Sure, you've got to respect Keehan for just giving a very, very honest answer, but you can't deny that he wasn't really very good for the optics of any organisation that wanted to appear respectable. It also didn't help that while Trius set up the tournaments to expand his organisation and put karate on the map, Keehan was in it to showboat and to boost his own image as a martial artist and promoter. Trius later reflected that Keehan was given too much power too young and too fast, and he spoke highly of his positive contributions to the USKA, his ability as a karateka, and how well liked he was. It was just a shame how things turned out once Keehan got free rein to do shit his own way as he struck out on his own. By the time he went solo, Keehan had two of his own dojos, the Imperial Academy of Fighting Arts and the Chicago Judo and Karate Center. Training cost $20 a month, which was on the pricier side at the time, but Keehan made sure that, if anything, his students got a little bit too much bang for their buck. But what was also notable was Keehan's dojos were rather diverse, which was a little bit controversial at the time. You see, it was the mid-60s, the heyday of the Black Panthers, so the powers that be weren't very keen on minorities learning to fight. I mean, they still haven't, but whatever. But, as a Mick, Keehan wasn't white either. So he said fuck that and taught whoever stepped through the door, being described as, and I quote, "loved the martial arts, he loved it. He ate it, he breathed it, he was blind to race, it didn't matter." Keehan had a very Goku-like outlook on life. He didn't care who or what you were, he wanted to fight you. The only quality that he respected at all was fighting prowess. So there was a lot of disrespect to go around. A favourite publicity stunt of Keehan's was trolling whites-only tournaments by selling black belts to attendees for just $15, which drew a lot of ire from all of the other instructors and real black belts. However, like many of the more traditional elements of karate, Keehan did not give a shit about rank. For all he cared, and I quote, "If a student wants to have a black belt, I give him one. But as far as I'm concerned, it could have polka dots, it could be green, yellow, purple. Karate is a fighting art, and that's what's most important to me, the fighting art. I am interested in whether my student can defend himself when attacked, and I don't mean by pulling his punches. The streets are where you learn whether or not you can fight, not in tournaments where they pull their punches." Say what you will about Keehan's respect for his own discipline, but on a practical level, he was kinda right about black belts not meaning jack shit in and of themselves. In fact, they're not even that much of a big deal in many martial arts. All the black belt often means is that you've got the basics down and now your training can start to get serious. Hence why many martial arts have a number of degrees of black belt that take a lot longer to progress through than the coloured belts. A lot of people think that a black belt means I have completed karate, I have completed taekwondo, I'm a master at it now. No, that's not what it means. It basically means you have now got the basics down and now your training can actually start to get serious. For instance, in taekwondo, it takes 3 to 4 years on average to get through the 10 grades from white belt to first dan. Then there is a waiting period of about 18 months before second dan, 2 years to third dan, 3 years to fourth dan, etc, etc. And it's not until you hit fourth dan that you're actually considered to have done your 10,000 hours and become an expert. And you'd still have a good number of years before you have the chance of promotion to master at 7th dan. And then you'll be practically an ancient old man by the time you become a 9th dan Grandmaster. Regardless of their rank, Keehan's students had a lot of success in tournaments, which, in addition to his showy promotional style, helped Keehan cultivate an image as the deadliest man alive. But as Keehan gained more prominence and notoriety, he started pushing the envelope a little bit too far. As far as he was concerned, he was the best around, and nothing was ever going to keep him down. Not even other dojos. On the 22nd of July 1965, Keehan and his right-hand man, the, get this, second deadliest man alive, Doug Dwyer, got caught drunkenly taping dynamite blasting caps to a rival dojo's window. And they were arrested for attempted arson, possession of explosives, and resisting arrest, earning themselves 2 years of probation. Why the fuck did they do that, I hear you ask? Well, it wasn't just for something as petty as street cred. Yet. We will get to that little gamer moment later. The dojo's owner had allegedly stiffed Keehan on payment for a tournament that he ran there. So he decided to blow out the dojo's windows over it. Even though this is actually one of the less insane things that Keehan would do in his time, this little instance of arson ended up haunting him forever, as naysayers wouldn't stop asking his students, "Hey, is your grandmaster still dynamiting dojos?" But while Keehan was clearly taking karate far, far too seriously, he did have other jobs to keep him occupied, such as selling porno magazines, managing a used car lot, and working as a hairdresser because 60s in his own salon named House of Dante. In the latter gig, he hairdressed for a bunch of rich clients, and it's said that one of them was Hugh Hefner, who enlisted Keehan's assistance with getting his sex slaves, playmates, ready for debasement and exploitation, photo shoots and parties. Of course, this was quite an out-of-left-field thing for the deadliest man alive to do, but it only added to his flamboyant persona. Especially since he was rubbing shoulders, or rather scalps, with celebrities as he did so. Pretty much every plate that Keehan spun was to bolster his image. As a notable student of his named Arthur Rapkin explained, he wasn't satisfied with just being a successful, well-respected martial artist. He also wanted to be like Elvis. But while Keehan wasn't exactly the king, he wasn't without a title. In 1967, John Timothy Keehan changed his name to Count Juan Raphael Dante. He didn't just adopt a stage name or a promotional gimmick or a kayfabe character. No, he legally changed his fucking name to that. And the newly deed-polled Count Dante emerged onto the scene at a tournament. Auburn hair dyed jet black, sporting a cape and a cane, topped with a lion's head, looking a lot more dangerous than ever. He was described as, and I quote, 6 foot, well built, and looked like a bodybuilder. If you fucked with him, he was liable to hurt you. Dante claimed that his parents were Spanish nobles who had fled the Civil War and changed their name for their own protection. Spanish aristocrats named Dante. Dante is an Italian name. But anyway, why would his aristocratic parents have needed to do all of that and keep up the pretense for decades? The good guys won the Spanish Civil War. Surely they could have all gone home while Dante was still in nappies. Well, all of this was likely done as a troll, as Dante's characteristically over-the-top way of making fun of the way that many of his contemporaries would make up ridiculous backstories to make themselves look badass and mysterious. I mean, Christ, he took his name from a character in The Count of Monte Cristo. And he would even explain his whole backstory of being the descendant of Spanish nobles who fled the country in an Irish accent. It is also believed that Dante's name might have been inspired by the time he spent organising bare-knuckle fights under Chicago's Dante Street Bridge. Though whether or not he actually did that, like everything else that we know about in this video, is up for debate. I wouldn't say that the sources for the video are unreliable narrators, they're just very, very confused. A lot of the articles written about Dante have a very distinct tone of what the actual fuck was his problem. They are still asking. Aiding in Dante's quest to reinvent himself as some new kind of supervillain was the fact that karate was still very, very new and exotic in the United States at the time, providing a kind of mystique that Dante played up very heavily, while also adding a big dose of that all-American machismo to develop himself into an almost mythical figure. In the spirit of making his persona as big and outrageous as possible, he kept a lion cub named Aurelia as a pet, and he took it for walkies around Chicago, eventually selling it when it got a little bit too big and it bit the mayor of Quincy during a photo shoot. Also in Dante's entourage was his sidekick and girlfriend, a bunny at the Playboy Club named Christy Carter. They quickly got together after she came home from work one night to find a mysterious bouquet of roses with a card that read, Count Dante in gold print. And she got swept up in all of the pomp and madness even more quickly. She would help the outrageously vain Dante shave intricate edges into his beard and revealed that he would often use makeup and he would sleep on a silk pillowcase to ward off wrinkles, saying that he liked being scary, but he also liked being beautiful. Since Dante clearly wants to fuck himself so badly, does that count as gay? Dante also taught Christy a little bit of karate, and he made her a character in his legend, claiming that she was a highly dangerous black belt and giving her the nickname Dulcinea. Is that how that's pronounced? I don't care enough to find out. After an idealised character in Don Quixote, Dante would bring Christy with him on nights out, wheel her out for TV appearances to break some boards and do some kata, and generally keep her around as eye candy. Naturally, she proved to be very, very popular, and her feminine grace balanced out the brutal hard edge of Dante's image. And it showed that anyone could learn karate and become deadly, even a dainty little playboy bunny, who was dubbed the Dragon Lady. So Dante had established his brand, stage managed his minion, and disciplined his image. Now all he needed was an audience. And the way that he did it is by far the most famous thing about him. His 1968 ad campaign. Dante would promote himself, well, his dojos as well, but mainly himself, by taking out ads in comic books. And these ads were absolutely fucking wild, promising outlandish skills and feats and sounding completely fucking insane. And we're not talking about sending Hash Brown Team Cobra Kai to the internet. No. Dante went whole hog. Yes, this is the deadliest and most terrifying fighting art known to man, and without equal, its maiming, mutilating, disfiguring, paralysing and crippling techniques are known by only a few people in the world. An expert at Dim Mak could easily kill many judo, karate, kung fu, aikido and gung fu experts one at a time with only fingertip pressure using his murderous poison hand weapons. Instructing you step by step through each move in this manual is nothing other than Count Dante, the deadliest man who ever lived, the Crown Prince of Death. Note that Dante didn't mention Taekwondo in that list of disciplines that he could render inert with a single touch. We have found Dante's weakness. He fears cool kicks. But it wasn't just these ads that put the eyes of the world on Count Dante. He also took the same approach to promoting his dojo as OnlyFans whores take to dating. He belonged to the streets and he gave away all of the goods for $5. Included in some of the ads for his dojos was a mail order form for an instruction manual that outlined the 57 attacks that comprise the world's deadliest fighting secrets. As the blurb reads, the forbidden and secret training manual of the Black Dragon Fighting Society has never before been available to anyone outside of the society. Recent attempts for regular publication and public exposure have been rejected as the contents were considered horrifyingly dangerous and brutally vicious. Dante spent the first 2 pages of the manual bragging about his strikingly handsome looks, his career so far, and his great degree of skill in martial arts, and for some reason, his classical singing. Yeah, for some reason he bragged about that in a manual that could apparently teach you how to kill people. But from that point onwards, much of the meat and potatoes of the manual was pictures of Dante in a silk black G, treating Doug Dwyer like Master Ken's Todd and ragdolling him about and subjecting him to demonstrations of moves such as groin slap or grab and tear off, which was also known as monkey stealing a peach. I mean, that is a little bit funny. My personal favourite image is this one, because the annotation is fucking bonkers. Gouge the fucker's eyes out with your thumbs so deep that you lobotomise him, before ripping his ears and face off like a chimpanzee. And yeah, I guess you could maybe throw him afterwards. I mean, if you want, I don't know, if you feel like it. Like, it must have really fucking sucked to be Dwyer. But on the bright side, he did get to put on a more dignified display of his own when he broke a board for the CBS News reporter that I mentioned earlier.
Well, there they went.
The manuals also came with a free membership card for the Black Dragon Fighting Society, which is the martial arts organisation that Dante founded. It was essentially created as the umbrella that all of his dojos would fall under. However, it is not to be confused with the Black Dragon Society, who were a secret society of Japanese ultranationalists operating in the 30s and 40s. Maybe they'll get a video one day. But despite all of the promises of absolute carnage, Dante understood that with great power comes great responsibility. So, one of his ads included a checkbox next to a disclaimer for any would-be students, and this disclaimer read, "I pledge never to use the deadly techniques of the manual as an aggressor, only to defend myself, and I will never abuse the trust placed in me." Dante even recognised that while he could teach you to kill someone with just a single strike, that could easily fail. So he also emphasised the need to keep fighting until you've won. For all of the crazy gimmicks, the thing that really made the ads and their associated goodies striking was the fact that all of the other instructors advertised themselves as clean-cut, disciplined military types who would offer wholesome guidance and teach their students how to defend themselves against bullies. Meanwhile, Count Dante was saying, "Fuck that, that's gay, kill the motherfucker," and taking the Johnny Lawrence approach. Instead of self-defense, he was teaching self-offense. Dante had firmly established himself as the deadliest man alive, and he had shown the world his secret killing techniques. So it was imperative that he live up to his promise to pass on that knowledge and create equally deadly students. And that he did through an extremely brutal training regimen. Dante was crease-maxing. Fear did not exist in his dojo. Pain did not exist in his dojo. Defeat did not exist in his dojo. While Dante was happy to throw out belts to whoever wanted them, he made damn sure that all of his students fucking earned them. Any students hoping for promotion to brown or black belt were put in a dimly lit room and put through a series of 4 full contact fights with other students, leaving bloodied and bruised with their new belts. And then they would all go out for beers after class. But little did they know that the lessons weren't done yet. Even outside of the dojo, Dante's students were constantly being trained and tested. Dante would very often go to a bar with a student, knock the drink out of the hand of the biggest guy that he could find, and then ask the student, "Why the fuck did you do that?" And then Dante would sit back and enjoy the carnage. And if the guy had a bunch of friends with him, too bad, the student had to fight them as well. Dante wasn't just teaching his students how to spar with each other, he was training them for combat out in the real world. So if you couldn't come out on top in a bar fight that he started, you had failed as a student. Dante was so serious about this that he even trained specific techniques for fighting in bars. But it wasn't just all street and bar fights against randos who had done nothing wrong. There were plenty of rival dojos in Chicago. And just like the classic kung fu movies, a lot of the students out of hours would go around challenging and fighting people from other dojos, either at the dojos themselves or in the streets. And when the Black Dragons were involved, these fights always escalated in intensity and violence. And so began the massive LARP that became known as the Dojo Wars. However, these guys were still students who loved fighting, so no matter how much these fights escalated, it would still be quite some time before they reached the level of seriousness of a kumite. For those who don't know, a kumite is very serious business. These are duels not unlike a real-life Agni Kai, where having your leg swept is the least of your worries. And most importantly, those involved fight to the death. Of course, a kumite is only a very serious affair if you're not Count Dante, who claimed to have killed numerous men before crowds of thousands in secret death matches in Thailand and China. Now, I know that you're all calling bullshit and pointing out that even if these events existed, they were reserved for the elite of the elite, and it was the highest honour for a fighter to be allowed in. So, do I really expect you to believe that some random American would have been invited to these? Well, Dante claims to have gotten into communist China by using forged passports and by bribing officials. And then he gained entry to the death matches by winning over the kumite organisers by demonstrating his fighting skill and kata to them. From there, he would do what he did best. Dante claimed to have killed a total of about 50 people, half during his time in the military and half in competitions and out in the street. But he had the humility to not brag about his body count too much, as he explained how the fact that he's built different gave him an edge. He said, "I do not dig killing, but I can psych myself up through what can be considered an overreaction of the pituitary glands, really pumping the adrenaline in there, what the Orientals call chi or ki. I just call it plain guts." Bro thinks he's him. Also among Dante's reported feats of strength was the ability to kill a bull with a single punch. And he was so confident that he decided to one-up his ancestors by publicly fighting one barehanded. He was going to fight a bull. But instead of the two fighters staring each other down at a weigh-in, Dante promoted his fight by driving around Chicago with his 2,000-pound opponent on the bed of a truck. However, the big day arrived, and for some inexplicable reason, Dante tried to get a 19-year-old student named Arthur Rapkin, shown on the left of this image that does go quite hard, to fight the bull in his stead. Whether or not Rapkin outright refused is unclear, but either way, the fight did not go ahead, because Dante pulled the plug, blaming the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals for shutting him down. Apparently, he was impeded by some bullshit about bullfighting being illegal, which I bet is completely, absolutely true, and not just something that he completely made up at the last second because he was shitting his fucking pants. Now, you would think that Dante would have taken being shut down as a serious insult, but he actually never really bothered to settle that beef. Obviously, this entire thing was just a publicity stunt for a martial arts event that Dante nipped in the bud before it all got a little bit too out of hand. But one thing that he definitely could do was punch a brick in half. Though it did take 3 strikes and he broke 5 bones in his hand in the process. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The kinds of bricks that you see martial artists breaking all the time are not real construction bricks. They are built specifically to look impressive and to be broken. Same with the boards. Those little punch boards are actually brittle as shit. However, it seems like whoever Dante sent to get the bricks didn't get the memo and they went to B&Q by mistake. That said though, Dante was no pussy, so despite having a broken hand, he still showed up to his classes the next day and ran all of them while wearing a cast. As you can clearly see, Dante was out to shake up the karate community in a big way, and he liked to use big stunts to call out other senseis that he didn't like on their bullshit. But he wasn't just saying L plus ratio before punching a brick, he was coming out with receipts. You see, throughout his early career, Dante had gone from dojo to dojo, sampling a little bit of all kinds of different martial arts. And he decided that they all kinda suck. But for once in his life, Dante decided to fight this battle by using his words, writing an article titled, "Karate is for Sissies." Over 7 pages, Dante skewered the state of karate, discussing many black belts that he knew from both the East and the West who couldn't win in a real street fight, and arguing that they and their insistence on protective equipment and not going full contact in training and competition had watered down the arts and therefore its users' effectiveness. As Dante put it, if you don't want to do damage with a technique, you might as well not know the technique. If you're afraid to draw a gun and pull the trigger, don't carry it. Fuck me, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Dante does have a point. And it's not just karate that he saw as having this problem either. He believed that pretty much all martial arts have gotten so caught up in form, kata, tradition, ceremony, and safetyism that they are no longer well optimized for real combat. And if you want to see a case study in what Dante is getting at, then watch my Shu Xiaodong video. What Dante found even more egregious was the fact that instructors would more often than not turn away the students with the most potential to be great fighters for being too aggressive, even though teaching discipline and self-control is half of the instructor's fucking job. Granted, Dante didn't exactly do that very much either, but you get the point. Say what you will about his philosophy, rhetoric, and methods, the man was, at the very least, logically consistent. The rest of the article is a systematic critique of the main principles of karate, such as movement, stances, techniques, etc., etc. It's certainly inflammatory, I mean, Jesus Christ, just look at the title, but the language is a lot more toned down and measured than you would expect, even constructive at points. Here's a particularly salient and well thought out analogy. In karate and most Oriental self-defense arts, there is an overemphasis on form practice, kata, terminology, and history, all of which have little to do with the development of effective street defense, which should be the ultimate goal of the students. For beauty, grace, and form, figure skating even surpasses ballet. Although strength is required to perform it properly, it could never be effectively used in professional hockey, where a more crude but far stronger and aggressive style of skating is required. One is for aesthetic beauty, while the latter demands practical effectiveness. Kata and controlled situations and environments obviously have a valuable place for drilling technique and developing muscle memory. They're essentially simulated fights, sort of like boxing combos that are practiced with pads. But no instructor worth his salt will deny that Dante was right when he said that experience is nature's best teacher. You've got to have an uncooperative opponent if you want to learn how to apply kata properly. And they don't do that in Aikido, which is why it doesn't fucking work. But sparring isn't just about putting techniques into real practice. Failing to do so is just as important for instilling courage and resilience. We've all been in scraps when we were younger, and you know that the only way to truly learn that getting punched in the face isn't particularly a big deal is to get punched in the fucking face. But of course, there is a line when it comes to conditioning, and Dante's insistence on full contact at all times on bare floors is genuinely insane. By all means, take some of the guardrails off and let the students have at it to get a proper feel for their own and each other's limits. But there is a reason why the emphasis is on going all out just this once. You can't fucking fight properly in real life if you've broken all of your bones and given yourself CTE during training. I'm not gonna lie, Dante was sort of spitting fire in that essay, which is ironic because that's probably the only superhuman feat he didn't claim to be able to do. He may have been out of line, but he had the spirit when he insisted that the greatest instructor he ever had was simply stress testing his skills in the street. And what the street had taught him was what Dante naturally promoted as a whole new martial art. The best self-defense system in the world for the streets. Kata Dante, or Dante the dance of death. Or as he put it is, my system is fuck 'em up waza. Because what I'm doing is fucking up the other guy's body. Since Dante was developed by taking everything the eponymous lunatic had been exposed to, cutting out the bullshit and keeping what worked best, Dante played to his strengths, drawing heavily from his boxing background. Therefore, Dante is very aggressive and up close, leaving very little space for kicks. As Dante explained, you don't use your feet much until your man is on the floor. Except that your legs will bring you in toward your opponent. Your legs are transportation, not weapons. However, there is another school of thought. Dante's successor, Bill Aguiar, believed that, since it involves a bit of everything, Dante is more of a frame of mind than a strict system. That's what's really being taught is the aggressive mindset needed to end the fight quickly and decisively by any means necessary. A killer instinct, if you will. In that sense, Aguiar kinda saw traditional martial arts like elite theorists see ideology. It's all a post hoc explanation for how to wield and exercise power. As Aguiar put it, I mean, there isn't much difference between a Goju front kick and a Taekwondo front kick. If you get it in the balls, both men are going down. It's only how the combinations are put together in a particular kata that make the difference. But it's not entirely accurate to say that Dante is more about mind over matter, because you can't have a fighting system named after Count Dante without his signature move, Dimmak, the Touch of Death. You know how I mentioned that Dante claimed that he could kill a man with just one strike? Well, this is it. And no, it's not just a crushing blow to the throat or a bump to the head that causes an opponent to ragdoll Rube Goldberg style into a load of obstacles until his head caves in. When I say touch of death, I mean literal touch. Like the Vulcan nerve pinch or Kill Bill's 5-point palm exploding heart technique or Kung Fu Panda's whooshy finger hold. As Dante described in one of the infamous ads for his manual, considered by many as evil and cruel, the lethally savage, ripping, tearing, slashing, clawing and gouging techniques which comprise the poison hand arsenal are used to attack by strike, touch or pressure the nerve centres, pressure points, major blood vessels and vital organs of the body. You will learn the original 77 poison hand techniques of ancient China and actual photographs showing them in application. These are not photos or drawings, but actual photos of Count Dante applying these torturing techniques which are meant to maim, disfigure, cripple or kill and have been used by Oriental terrorists and assassins to murder. The manual has a handy diagram of all of the different pressure points on the body that Dimmak works on, as well as a list of times in the day where each location is most effective, because apparently different pressure points work better at different times of the day. But how exactly did the technique work, I hear you ask? Don't worry about it. But anyway, as a result of all of that, Dante really sent Dimmak into the mainstream, and he furthered his own popularity by doing so. In the end, we don't actually know how many people bought the manuals, though it is claimed that millions of dollars were made off of them, meaning that Dante was considered to be one of the richest men in martial arts. Not that that was very hard, since basically none of the dojos operating at the time turned much of a profit. But through the infamy brought to him by the ads, manual, and his own antics, Dante's coffers were now just about as big as his ego. By 1969, Count Dante was at the top of his game, with 3 more dojos to his name. And he was becoming so influential that his edgy brand was starting to rub off on other Chicago-based martial arts instructors who started to copy his over-the-top, I'll fucking kill you style of advertising. Dante also claimed to have taught 60% of Chicago's karate instructors, which, if true, would have certainly gone a long way in remaking the karate scene in his image. You can scoff at the 60% figure, but a number of his students did go on to become senseis and open their own dojos. So, while we can't say for sure how big his influence actually was, he was certainly a big figure. So big, in fact, that the Black Belt magazine completely avoided reporting on Chicago because they didn't think that any of the stuff going on there was of any benefit to karate. Dante had quite literally given Chicago's karate scene a bad name, leading to Black Belt bemoaning the city's overly aggressive sluggers who used too many dangerous striking and throwing techniques along with too much body contact. Dante himself protested this by pointing out that tamer sports like hockey and football had a lot more contact than karate tournaments at the time. And the other local instructors protested that Dante was actively damaging all of their reputations, and he did not represent all of Chicago's karate scene. Convinced by the latter argument, Black Belt eventually caved, leading to a profile/roundtable interview/struggle session featuring Dante and a few other figures in the scene, titled The Trial of Count Dante. As you would expect, the article was 7 pages of senseis coping and seething while Dante refused to move an inch on any of their criticisms. But Dante didn't need those pussies on his side. By this point, it had already been years since Dante went, "Fine, I'll start my own governing body with black G's and swept legs." All the way back in 1964, Dante had co-founded the World Karate Federation. Not that one. So that he could run tournaments by his own rules, fully showcasing everything that he thought made karate great. It was not without its critics, of course, with Dante's old mentor Trius saying, "Karatekas who will support and engage in this type of fiasco are so desperately seeking to destroy and undermine the true ethics and spirit of Karate-Do." In September of 1968, one of these events took place. A full-contact, multidisciplinary tournament named the World Fighting Arts Championship. Some of the more Rogan-pilled among you may have had your monkey brains activated by the word multidisciplinary. And yes, you would be right in saying that this tournament was very ahead of its time, though it was a little bit too far ahead to actually work. The lack of protective gear at the tournament was heavily criticised by instructors and the wider martial arts community, which brought bad publicity, but Christie was on hand to help with promotion. And by help, I mean tone down the hype that Dante was drumming up and telling people that no holds will be barred, and although we don't expect bloodshed, we want each match to end decisively. Little bit of a woman moment. As a publicity stunt, Dante went to Muhammad Ali's house to challenge him to fight at the tournament, and he was promptly ignored. Bruce Lee was also invited, but he failed to show up. Unfortunately, there was only so much that even a promotional juggernaut like Dante could do. Being exiled from the martial arts establishment was a massive hurdle, so attendance wasn't that great. And matters were made even worse when a karateka decided to pull a Karate Kid 2 by breaking a £500 block of ice. It's not usually the hardest feat, but it would make for a good enough show-stopping spectacle. However, the hot weather had caused the ice to melt and glaze over, so the poor bastard was left trying and failing, hitting it again and again, and the ice not budging, so much so that a bunch of the sweltering crowd just gave up on the event and went home. This failure hit Dante hard, as he was hell-bent on making sure everything he did was a roaring success at all costs. So this event losing money from the poor ticket sales was unacceptable. So Dante hatched a scheme to avoid paying back the venue and other creditors that funded the event. Arthur Rapkin was instructed to take the money that had been collected from the box office to the bank. However, Dante secretly told him, "I don't want you to make it to the deposit box. You're going to get robbed. What you're going to do is you're going to take the money and then you're going to report to the police that you got robbed by a couple of guys with a shotgun." Since he wasn't being asked to fight a fucking bull this time, Rapkin obliged, later justifying committing a fucking crime by saying, "I was the guy that followed my sensei's wishes," as Dante pocketed the money. Also, I hope all of you have been having a lot of fun so far, because things are about to get dark. As the 60s came to a close, Dante began to get increasingly unhinged as he was hit with setbacks and consumed by his own outrageous persona. And taking the brunt of it all was Christie, whom Dante had always treated like little more than a prop. Reports of her fighting prowess were, as you would expect, greatly exaggerated. While she enjoyed what she described as the dance-like beauty of the movements of karate, she wasn't particularly strong. Those boards that Christie broke on TV were actually broken and glued back together right before it. And she was wearing rings as she broke them, which left her with swollen fingers that she and Dante hid off camera. And that was the least of her problems, because Dante would very often, let's just say, show her his moves. And when he wasn't physically abusive, he would torment her by holding a gun to her head and threatening to kill her if she ever broke character and told anyone the truth about Dante's image or blabbed to anyone about the fake post-tournament robbery. Like many other such cases, Christie was stuck in a cycle of returning to Dante after particularly bad incidents. But to her unending credit, she finally snapped one morning. While making Dante breakfast, she threw a pan full of hot grease at him and grabbed a kitchen knife. This angered Dante, who flew into a rage and went on the offensive, getting himself slashed on the arm for his trouble. And just like that, it was over. The fact that Christie had fought back made Dante realise that he didn't control her anymore, and the karate power couple finally went their separate ways. Without the respectable face of Kata Dante, Count Dante was unleashed, getting more and more violent as he went off the deep end. And as a new decade arrived, the long-running, small-scale dojo wars came to a head. On the 24th of April 1970, Jim Koncevic, Dante's best friend and right-hand man, was calling the Black Dragons together for a dojo storm. You see, Dante had a gripe with a member of the Green Dragon Society and was seeking satisfaction. Over what, I hear you ask? Well, one Black Dragon who refused the call asked the same question, and Koncevic simply replied, "Oh, you know, John, over abroad or something." However, Dante himself later claimed that he and a friend of his had received death threats, one of which came in the form of a green dragon calling Dante to declare that he will be killed in the street. Dante then rose to the challenge by telling the green dragon to name a time and a place. The green dragon retorted that the hit would take Dante unawares. So Dante called the dream... This video's too long. That was a little tongue-tie. I don't care. I'm just going to keep going. So Dante called the Green Dragons a group of sissies, and the guy hung up. Dante then made a phone call of his own to the Green Dragons' headquarters, informing them that he was going to, and I quote, level their entire instructor force. Being the egomaniac that he was, Dante figured that just him, Koncevic, and another friend named Mike Felkoff would be more than enough manpower to take on the 10 to 15 Green Dragon instructors that he had called out easily enough. But Koncevic brought 3 of his own students along, much to Dante's chagrin. Chagrin. I don't know. I'm done with the tongue ties. This video is very long. I'm just going to keep going. Meanwhile, Felkoff had been told that he would be there only to act as an intermediary to make sure that no one got too badly hurt and that the fight didn't spill into the street. Well, something was about to spill into the street. This little Dojo Wars LARP, well, it's about to get very serious. Up to this point, skirmishes in the Dojo Wars were fairly routine. It was all petty rivalries and grudge matches that were played out between dojos all the time in the martial arts scene, usually as a consequence of students being poached. But things would take a particular turn with this dojo storm. How exactly all of it went down is rather unclear because there are a bunch of different conflicting accounts. But I'm going to do my best to present it all as cohesively as possible. So, as planned, Dante and his 5 students attacked the Black Cobra Hall, home of the Green Dragon Society. And since they had been ever so kindly tipped off by Dante himself that he was coming, the dojo was defended by a garrison of instructors, the ones that he had promised to take down. Allegedly, the Black Dragons knocked on the door and claimed to be cops to gain the element of surprise, with Dante himself taking point, flashing a fake badge at the door, and walking straight up to the head honcho. The Green Dragons then tooled themselves up with the Chinese weapons that they kept hanging on the walls. This was a problem as Dante had made a point of ensuring that the Black Dragons were unarmed before entering the dojo. And he later went on to lambast the Green Dragons for cowardice over immediately resorting to weapons. Once all 6 of the Black Dragons were inside, the Green Dragons slammed the doors shut and surrounded them. Dante struck first, and Koncevic dropped a guy who swung at him with a mace. His 3 students immediately bolted for the door, falling over themselves to try and get it unlocked, leaving the 3 instructors exposed from behind. All 3 of them got good and sliced up, but they gave as much punishment as they got, with a green dragon named Jose Gonzalez getting whacked in the eye with a nunchuck by Dante. Either that or he tried to pluck the guy's eye out. The story changes depending who you ask. Much of the carnage was concentrated though on Koncevic, who was a little worse for wear when he attacked a green dragon named Jerome Greenwald from behind. Of course, one tends to freak out when attacked by a 6'2", 265-pound absolute unit of a judo and karate champion, so Greenwald grabbed a 14-inch knife from the wall and, in what he claimed was an accident, plunged it straight into Koncevic. Dante immediately called off the attack, threatening to call the cops if the fighting didn't stop, while Koncevic ordered a retreat to the tune of "get the fuck out" as his students finally kicked the door off of its hinges. Since the situation was desperate, Dante locked the fuck in and covered everyone's exits by taking down all of the Green Dragons. Or so he claimed. While a heavily bloodied Koncevic, covered in a dozen stab and slash wounds, was helped out of the dojo by a few of his comrades. And then Greenwald threw a fucking spear through his throat. In a matter of mere seconds from start to finish, this dojo storm ended with Koncevic dying in a pool of his own blood on the pavement outside of the dojo as the Black Dragons retreated. As one of the fighters described the grim scene, you could swim through that sidewalk. Everyone involved was arrested. A number of sources say that Dante was hiding in his office when the cops got to him, though he and a few sources recalled him being picked up at the scene along with everyone else. But while the situation was fucked beyond all recognition, Dante just could not turn the bullshit off, claiming to have plucked several eyeballs out of the heads of all of his enemies. Of course, medical reports after the fact easily debunked that. Sure, the Green Dragon's instructor that Dante had whacked had been so badly injured that he needed surgery to save his eye, but everyone else's peepers were ultimately left intact. So, despite the big fancy display of CQC, the world's most iconic Cyclops kept them waiting. Dante was charged with aggravated battery and, due to Illinois' rules about accountability, convict's murder, for which Greenwald was, of course, also charged. Unfortunately, Saul had an appointment with a sunroof at the time, so he enlisted the assistance of a mob lawyer named Bob Cooley. And you are not going to believe the verdict at the end of the trial. In 1971, everyone in the Dojo storm was acquitted. The whole affair was so stupid, so ridiculous, that the judge basically just chewed all of them out and told them to fuck off, shouting, "You are each as guilty as the other. I've never seen such a pack of lunatics." The judge essentially said, "You are all cringing gay, get out of my sight." While you might be thinking that Dante got off lightly for getting his friend fucking murdered, he was absolutely skewered in the court of public opinion. His reputation after that was completely destroyed. Just when you thought he couldn't be shunned even more, Dante was uber cancelled by the martial arts community. He lost everything and sunk deep into the bottle to wash down painkillers while experimenting with pretty much every other narcotic known to man. Koncevic's mother lived just across the road from the cemetery where he was buried, and she would pass through it whenever she went out. Quite rightly, the family never forgave Dante. His career was over. There may have only been one fatality in that Dojo storm, but Count Dante was as good as dead. As the dust settled, Count Dante became reflective, saying, "I blame myself to a great extent for being responsible for us going over to the Black Cobra Hall in the first place, and have gone through living hell because of it." And then he vowed that, and I quote, "My days of fighting at the drop of a hat have come to an end, and challenges I will accept no more unless first attacked." However, this did not last long because the fucker just could not help himself. Dante assaulted a guy in a bar who called him a fruit, and he beat up two guys in a liquor store car park for laughing at the fake Spanish coat of arms on his car door. He also struck Cooley, his fucking lawyer, in the chin. Who the fuck assaults their own lawyer? Realising how fucking stupid this was, Dante tried to make up for it by getting Cooley to take a shot at him with a pistol so that he could catch the bullet, as a party trick. Instead, a sour Cooley did his best to completely avoid Dante, but he still had to bail him out when he fell afoul of a Southside mob boss named Jimmy the Bomber Catuara, which ended with Dante having to pay the mob boss $25,000. Dante then entered his Mark Wahlberg era when the public information director of a Kung Fu association, Paul Kwan, questioned how a Caucasian could hold a 10th degree black belt in Kung Fu. Dante challenged him to a death match and told him that all Orientals should be put in ovens. The ghost of Count Dante didn't seem to be taking the afterlife very well. He didn't like Asians because he thought they sucked at fighting and that their martial arts schools got by on some mystical bullshit and financial assistance from the government. But surprisingly, this was not the case for Dante. While the level of his involvement is unclear, he still had some sort of stake in adult bookshops and a car dealership following the collapse of his dojo empire. He also claimed that the charges from the Dojo storm were dropped because he had exhausted his entire fortune to get his own guys off, which reduced him to selling peanuts at a baseball game. Dante also claimed that a member of the outfit, the mob, got him this job, which led to further, let's just say, opportunities. One of these may or may not be the 1974 Chicago Purolator heist, which Dante was accused of plotting on behalf of the outfit. $4.3 million in cash was stolen from the Purolator Armed Express vaults, making it the biggest cash robbery in US history at the time. Fortunately for Dante, however, he passed a polygraph during the police interview. So even though he wasn't around for the trial, he was never in any real trouble. This stroke of luck seemed like the start of a second wind for Dante. On the 16th of March 1975, it was time for Count Dante's last ride, presenting the Tauntaun Death Matches in Massachusetts, which was sort of an early attempt at an MMA competition. Obviously, the bouts were not literal death matches. The whole thing was basically just a full-contact karate tournament with some more whimsical rules. But what mattered was that this was Dante's last-ditch attempt to revive his martial arts career. And he fucked it. Reporting after the fact was dire, saying that Dante looked bored, demonstrating only a predilection for non-stop gum chewing and disinterested detachment worthy of a fiddling Nero. In fact, the event as a whole was lambasted, with the scathing review summarising, whatever the reason for this expo, the resulting manifestation was trash. Unable to catch a break from years and years of accumulated bad karma, Dante subsequently claimed that the poor show at the tournament and the Purolator heist allegations left him in very bad favour with the outfit, which made him very paranoid, convinced that they were going to kill him. For days, he would refuse to leave his house, and he sat by the phone with a shotgun in his lap. Count Dante, the great, mythic, larger-than-life, showboating, egomaniacal, deadly, legendary Count Dante, was reduced to telling a reporter, "I want people to forget me." And he was so deep in the shit that he couldn't even get that. In the end, Count Dante died suddenly on the 25th of May 1975 at the age of just 36. Some believe that he had been assassinated, a victim of dim mak at the hands of a karateka who thought that Dante's mob connections brought dishonour to the Black Dragon Fighting Society. Others, such as Christie, his ex-girlfriend, thought that the mob or Konsevik's family had put a hit out on him. Christie even called the funeral home for confirmation just to make sure that Dante hadn't faked his death, since she would not have been surprised at all if he had. In the end, there was no such excitement to close out Dante's story. Nothing to claw back some of his legend and save him some face. He actually died in his sleep as the result of a hemorrhage from an ulcer, clearly due to rampant alcoholism. And as if that wasn't enough I'm just going to keep going. Enough of an ignominious end, he was buried in an unmarked grave in St. Joseph's Cemetery. This has been a very long video. Let's just keep going. After Dante's death, leadership of the Black Dragon Fighting Society passed to his protege and appointed successor, Supreme Grandmaster Bill Aguiar Jr., the accomplice to the attempted bombing of the rival school. While Aguiar had Dante's blessing, he didn't exactly keep the organisation going in his master's image. He calmed the promotion stuff right the fuck down and left all of that dim-mak stuff behind. He said, and I quote, "I'm still teaching the Dante system," he said, "only we're doing it a little quieter now. That's basically the only difference. When a student first comes to the school, we don't immediately begin teaching him the bastardized system, which is called the Dante system. We start off with classical karate. If we're running a judo program, we are teaching Kodokan Judo. We're not teaching Count Dante's version of Kodokan Judo. All the different systems we do teach are classical. A lot of our students never go into the Dante system." So, it was basically a really nice way of saying, oh yeah, all that funky wonky woo woo shit, we put that in the bin. When Aguiar died in 2005, the mantle was passed down to his son, Bill Aguiar III, though not without a succession crisis. In the red corner was a rival with an even dumber series of names than Count Dante. Radford William Davis, aka Christopher Hunter, aka Dr. Ha-Ha Lung, aka Ashida Kim. The last of these is very Count Dante-esque in nature, in that it's really fucking stupid. While Dante claimed to be a Spaniard despite having an Italian name, Ashida Kim has no first name. Ashida is a Japanese surname, and Kim is obviously Korean. Though some would argue that it's therefore also a Japanese name. I've been reading up a lot on Japanese ultranationalists. But anyway, Sensei, whatever the fuck is his name, had learned Count Dante's Dance of Death and started teaching it while giving out Black Dragon Fighting Society membership cards, sparking a little bit of a conflict with Aguiar. And how did they settle their differences? You would think that they would fight, wouldn't you? But nope, Aguiar just sued the man of too many names in October of 2005 for copyright and trademark infringement, and the latter's websites were shut down. But while losing in a court of law, Kim insists that he can still win on the mat. Okay, sure, I'll take him at his word. Let's see the two of them in action. First up is Aguiar. And now, let's see how Kim would do. Now, you may be inclined to give Kim props because he remembered to re-stomp the groin, but if his epic skills aren't badass enough, he can even levitate. Yeah, this whole thing's a fucking joke. Other influential figures in the martial arts scene who were influenced by Dante included a student of his named Eddie Baker, who claims to run the oldest black-owned dojo in the USA. A number of sources believe that Frankie Dux based his outlandish claims to have won a 60-round kumite in the Bahamas on the exploits of Count Dante, which inspired the Van Damme classic Bloodsport, on which Dux himself actually worked as a fight choreographer. There is also Floyd Webb, who actually met Dante all the way back at the 1964 World Karate Tournament. Eventually, he became a documentary filmmaker seeking to get to the bottom of Dante's legend after becoming captivated by it so long ago. He's been working on his documentary, The Search for Count Dante, since 2004, which has gone through a number of iterations, delays, legal barriers, and funding bids, because, God forbid, anything to do with Count Dante just be fucking simple. Hopefully the project will be completed and see the light of day, but for now, the project so far has been chronicled on Webb's website, thesearchforcountdante.com. But considering that it's been 20 years, I don't think it's coming out. When all is said and done, despite all of the gimmicks, stunts, and murder, Count Dante and a lot of his students were the real deal. Say what you will about the man, and God knows I have, because look at the length of this fucking video, I am so fucking tired, but Dante was a real martial artist, and a good one. He was genuinely a good fighter who had really good technique, and he emphasised the fundamentals. And his dojos taught proper karate. Well, between heaps of showy bullshit. Even Dante's long-estranged mentor, Robert Trias, gave him his due after he died, by saying, "While in my dojo and in the USKA, John was a good student, dedicated and very loyal to me and the USKA. John, without a doubt, was greatly instrumental in the expansion of USKA and especially in organising and bringing together the karate schools and karatekas in the Midwest. As a leader, he had great potential. As a leader, he had great potential. There was no one like him anywhere." It is a real shame that Dante went completely overboard and became the very thing that he sought to destroy in his quest to troll subpar martial artists. The School of Hard Knocks is a hallowed institution, but the Count Dante chicanery got way out of hand and ruined a bunch of people's lives. One of the saddest things is that the consensus that Keehan could have been one of the best martial artists of all time is pretty much unanimous. But any true potential for greatness was dashed by his alter ego, Count Dante, which affected the public perception of karate like a drop of shit in a glass of water. Even now, it is extremely hard to tell where the LARP ended and where Keehan started to get high on his own supply and become utterly consumed by fame, ego, booze, and narcotics. When the showmanship gets dialed up to that extent, standards inevitably slide, from characters like Count Dante cutting insane promos to get people through the door for real classes, to imitators scamming impressionable kids out of $300 with their 8-week Rex Kwon Do program. And unfortunately, that's Dante's legacy. He may not have opened the first McDojo, but he certainly laid the foundation for all of the ones that emerged as, whether deliberately or not, the tropes that Dante established mean that there's a little bit of Count Dante in every single fake sensei. But for all of the wrong that Keehan did to people and for all of the damage that he caused to the reputation of martial arts in the West, he really did seem to just get it sometimes. The man tried to introduce MMA a few decades early. And long before that, his views on tournaments were completely vindicated as the public squeamishness about full contact competitions faded over the years. Obviously, the training regimen was a health and safety and insurance nightmare, but to be fair, it's not as if Dante was ever teaching kids how to literally kill each other. He flat out refused to teach students under the age of 21. So, he does earn a little bit of credit for that. Also, it is obligatory to mention that the character Mr. Satan from Dragon Ball Z is apparently based on Count Dante. Evident from the character being a supposed martial arts expert that claims to have killed many people in fights, claims to be able to kill a man with a single blow, claims to be the greatest martial arts teacher in the world, tries to sell his instructional books on martial arts, all while getting fucked up in every single fight that he gets into. On top of the fact that the character looks exactly fucking like Count Dante, but the Dragon Ball Z creators have never confirmed that he was in fact the inspiration for the character, most likely to avoid lawsuits. This video has been very hard to write in many ways because Keehan as a character is caught between so many extremes. On one hand, he's a chaotic evil supervillain with literal blood on his hands, but on the other, he was a fiercely passionate sensei with his finger firmly on the pulse of what the martial arts scene needed to evolve. As if aware of how hard he is to pin down, Keehan said in an interview that, 90% of what I've told you on tape and off is bullshit. And I'm the only one who knows which 10% is the truth. And he later walked this statement back to 50-50. But is that figure even true? Who the fuck knows? But isn't that kind of the point? I think Keehan's friend Algene Coralia best described what made Count Dante so compelling. He's got a lot of balls though. You gotta give him that. He used to tell us about beating up 3 guys in a street fight. And you'd almost believe him. You want to know something about charisma? Listen to John. It's really fun. Isn't he nice to talk to? You know he's an ass, but you wonder how a guy can think you're that dumb to believe what he's telling you. But in the old days, karate was still a mystery. And until we took it out of its mysterious realm and put it in the tournament ring, karate was something terrifying in those days. Those 18, 19-year-old kids would listen to John telling how he could stick his fingers into their rib cages, tear their mouths out, rip away their throat. God, that scares anybody. When you put it like that, of course Count Dante sounds ridiculous and self-indulgent and an obscenely gauche product of the 60s. Because he is. But the reason that that sort of persona has captivated so many people for so many years is the simple fact that it's so fucking cool. You do kind of wish that all of the things he was saying were true and he actually was the real person that he made himself out to be. Because again, it's pretty fucking cool. All of the images that I've shown you in this video have been stupid. But a good number of them have gone surprisingly hard. And you know what? Perhaps we can learn from Count Dante at his best. In this day and age, maybe there is a place for that kind of rough and tumble, aggressive, no fucks given attitude. At the very least, it would certainly be very, very interesting to see Count Dante on the scene today.
Please join me in a moment of silence as we strive to end intolerance in our time.
Kick that pansy bitch in the face.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody subscribe.